the Sustainability Management Master's Program, you are answering one simple question. Do you care about your future generation? If you care about your kids, their grandkids, then you care about sustainability. And a sustainability manager is someone who has the tools to make people understand how they can contribute towards developing a sustainable world. We have both part-time and full-time students. Our curriculum is 30 hours. Instead of thesis, we have a research project course and a seminar course which provides them with the kind of research background they will need to be successful in their job. But at the same time, sustainability is not always everything about environment. It also relates to the business. They will take a sustainable business strategies course. They will take a project management course. Most of these courses are going to be taught by industry people, the people who are doing sustainability on a daily basis as a part of their job. Any organization that has a large number of employees and has a physical infrastructure, they will have to have a sustainability office. If you have the passion to develop and maintain a sustainable world, come to us and we will help you shape your passion into a career which will create an impact. Till the daylight saving time, I guess. So it's a pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Sanjogita Chavan. Today's seminar is sponsored by H2M Architects and Engineers. Sanjogita is a practice leader in land use planning at H2M. She is a professional planner with more than 30 years of professional experience, including 7 years as an architect in India before coming to the US to pursue her graduate degree in urban planning. She has more than 23 years of experience providing comprehensive land use planning services to both private and public sector clients in New Jersey and New York. As a planning consultant, she has helped her municipal clients by preparing master plans, redevelopment and affordable housing plans, historic preservation plans, zoning ordinances, design guidelines, etc. She has served private sector clients by providing professional testimony as an expert witness, designing streetscapes and park projects, preparing environmental impact analysis, etc. Sanjogita got her bachelor's degree in architecture from the University of Mumbai and a master's degree in urban planning from the University of Michigan. So today she will talk about sustainability in land use planning. So welcome, Sanjogita.
Thank you so much, Professor Sarkar. I will be talking about sustainability in land use planning, just so that the audience knows. Although I'm trained as an architect and a land use planner, I work extensively with civil engineers at H2M and also with engineers in my capacity as a professional planner providing services to various municipalities. So this talk about sustainability in land use planning is a topic that I really am passionate about. I hope I don't bore you guys, but I'll try to keep it concise. Land use planning in New Jersey is regulated by the municipal land use law. Those are the state statutes, and I'll be using that interchangeably. And it sets the processes, the substance of how planning is done at a municipal level. But what's pertinent into our topic is it includes preparation of master plans and zoning regulations. I will discuss the statutory requirements of the master planning process and discuss how policies are made to include sustainable development in municipalities. I'm sure you're all aware that the presence of environmental resources in our beautiful state makes it highly regulated. So we'll examine the mandatory state environmental regulations, how they influence local policies, and this will, I hope, that it will help provide an understanding of how planning is conducted in this state. So what is a master plan? A master plan is a guiding document for multidisciplinary planning. It provides a long-range vision for the built environment of a community by guiding appropriate use of lands within the municipality with the end goal of protecting public health, safety, and general welfare. It is a document that provides a policy foundation for a municipality's zoning ordinance. I'm making assumptions here, so forgive me, but some of you probably are civil engineers and you may end
Yes.
up. Okay, so you may design site plans and subdivision plans where you'll be required to review. Some of you may provide service not just to private developers, but will also provide services to municipalities. So understanding what a municipal ordinance is very important in our field. And the other thing too is zoning ordinances are mandatory. It's zoning compliance of that is important. It is important to also note the difference between a master plan and a zoning ordinance. The master plan does not set forth zoning standards. It just provides recommendations based upon which a municipality can prepare or amend their ordinance. Going back, I don't want to bore you with the history, but want to give you context, right? So the authority to regulate land uses is granted by the legislative branch of our government, or the state government, as per the New Jersey Constitution of 1947. This legislation also authorizes to delegate some of its powers to municipalities. So these were done through several laws since 1918, so it's more than 100 years old. But since 1975, the Municipal Land Use Law, or MLUL, or state statutes, it grants the municipality the power to enact a master plan, which has a land use element. And if such a plan is enacted, then the municipality can adopt zoning ordinances. Please note that municipalities are not compelled. It's not compulsion to exercise their authority to plan or zone. But very frankly, given the size of a state and the value of our properties, it's a good idea to do that. The MLUL is an enabling statute and it's permissive. What that means is that it allows, but a municipality is not obligated. And that's important to know. But those importance of having that, as I mentioned, the value of the land. But the other thing too is the zoning ordinances generally do not get termed as obsolete or outdated if they are adopted in accordance with the master plan recommendations. There are different exceptions to that rule in terms of how a governing body can adopt it, even if it's not consistent with the master plan, but it's beyond the scope of today's lecture, and I'll be happy to answer questions should you need more information. Also, should a municipality exercise their authority to draft ordinances, it cannot be in conflict with the authority exercised by the county, state, or federal government. So, for example, whatever that is assigned, your town that where Stevens is, Hoboken, has their own ordinances, but that gets trumped by whatever Hudson County has, or the state of New Jersey has, or the federal statute. So it's important to know that. And anytime a municipality exercises its authority, it has to be exercised, it must be exercised in strict conformity with the provisions of the Municipal Land Use Law, or the MLUL. Okay, so going back to what is in a master plan, right? So as the MLUL sets forth standards of what constitutes a master plan. At a minimum, a master plan must include goals and objectives and a land use plan. What are goals and objectives? Goals and objectives are basically a statement of what is the objective of this particular municipality, why, what are they trying to do, protect land, create residential densities, like those are the goals, right? They form the foundation, and upon that you build a land use plan or other plan elements. So at a minimum, a master plan must have a goals and objective and a land use plan. There are optional discrete elements that the municipality may adopt. As an engineer, as engineers, you would probably be interested in is circulation plan, which is transportation. There are standards how these have been should be written, not relevant to our study, but just to give you an idea. Housing plan, green buildings and sustainability, historic preservation, farmland preservation, recreation, conservation, utility, etc., etc. The statute has 2 pages dedicated to what all this constitutes. I have purposely put in red land use and housing plan because these plans provide a policy framework for ordinance changes. So as per the MLUL, any zoning ordinance is prepared to effectuate a land use plan element or a a housing plan element. So that's why it's shown in red. I'm also showing in green a circulation plan and a historic preservation plan element for a simple reason that these two will be a part of the case studies, because this is, to me, I can talk for hours, but it's boring. So I try to give practical examples to make you understand what this is all about, right? A master plan needs to be updated every 10 years as per the statute. So if you're in compliance and want to do that, it's recommended. And you don't have to take go through the whole expense of preparing a brand spanking new master plan. We have a process called as a master plan re-exam, where you just see what has changed over the past 10 years. What that does is keeps your ordinances up to date. So there are benefits of doing that, not relevant to our lecture, but just for your understanding. So as per the MLUL, there's a process. Everything has to be procedurally correct, right? So the land use law confers the power to adopt a master plan to the planning board, right? So planning board is basically a board of independent voluntary residents that are appointed by the governing body. Okay, they are not political. They could have a mayor or a councilman. It's not relevant, but they could have that. But it's basically a voluntary organization. Now the MLUL also confers upon the township council or whoever is the governing body, city council, to adopt the implementing ordinances based on these recommendations. Again, it's not mandatory. They are not obligated. They may choose to, or they may not do that. But this is how the process of municipal land use law works in the state of New Jersey. So moving on, what is a land use plan element? A land use plan element is prepared basically based on what the statutes require you to include, right? It's a required element, as I mentioned. It establishes a framework for growth, land development, and land conservation. It sets forth land use policies. So they determine several aspects of the community, like such as what's the population density, what is the availability of housing, what are the housing types, the location of residential uses, commercial uses, offices, warehouses, industrial uses, mixed uses, institutional uses, and open space, right? So a good balance of these land uses can help a community to meet its goals. As I mentioned, a goal of having this master plan or zoning is for the health, safety, and quality of life for a municipality and its residents. The very every community keeps evolving, and I'm sure you must have noticed if you drive down suburban highways, you see these old shopping centers. Some of them are vacant. Then you see offices that are partially vacant. So land use planning process is very dynamic, right? So the various economic, demographic, the regulatory changes that are happening. So it's very pertinent for a township or a city or a village or sorry, we have boroughs in New Jersey to review its existing land use regulations. This enables them to meet the challenges of the 21st century and continue to thrive. And this evaluation is extremely important as it enables a community to plan for the next decade or so. Like, for example, I have seen ordinances where they still have telephone exchange as a permitted use and prohibits tattoo parlors, for example. Now, today, tattooing is an art, and there are towns that actually think it's a good economic development strategy to permit those uses. So the reason why I'm explaining this is for you to understand how this process evolves, and not just in New Jersey, throughout the country, but especially so in New Jersey because we have all these regulations that keep getting updated. I included for your reference to show you, we look at the land use data. So like this is a suburban community, one of my clients, where the residential is 54%, so it's predominantly residential. Then we also evaluate age pyramid based on the census data. So as you can see, it's a reverse pyramid, so it has a more aging population. These kind of things are important because the needs of the people change. So when you have, say, for example, an aging population, then they would like to have more senior housing, smaller, more compact housing. So all this is very important because it provides that policy framework for the town then to adopt the ordinance to implement this or effectuate all these recommendations. Um, the next step is, what are the contents of a land use plan? So as I mentioned, the goals and objectives, which are essential as it is the foundation on which a physical, economic, and social development of a municipality is based, right? Then, as I mentioned earlier, we have to evaluate the demographic characteristics of the town, look at the existing land uses, what are the type of housing that's available, what's currently existing. So we look at the existing zoning and how the municipality has been evolving, right? Again, I cannot emphasize enough that because our state is highly regulated and it's not a cheap place to live, right? So it's regulated because we have the waterfront, we have the Pinelands area, we have the Highlands area, we have Meadowlands, which is not too far from where you guys are. So there has been an emphasis on growing smartly. So when I say smart growth, it means you plan economic and community development to to curb uncontrolled expansion. Urban areas that keep on growing and there's worsening of environmental conditions. Like I'll give you an example, 20, 30 years ago, farmlands, right, were getting replaced by these suburban large single lot development, which were very autocentric. Today, we think of, oh my gosh, let's have transit oriented development because this is not good planning, right? So that's what I mean. Smart growth plans for development attempt to curb this suburban sprawl. So typically there are environmental benefits doing that, such as reducing vehicle miles traveled, decreasing greenhouse gases, incorporating environmental awareness into land use decisions, conserving areas like highlands is the bed of all our drinking water, right? So create then it's important to create links. People, you know, doing this for 23 years, I can tell you people want to bike, want to walk, but if you are in an area which it's really dangerous to do so, why would you do that? You would hop in your car and drive. And as the state is highly developed, everybody knows this. You guys live in Hoboken, which is mini Manhattan. Um, the MLUL has continued to include sustainability strategies. So since 2017, which is almost 8 years ago, a master land use plan element should include smart growth strategies such as showing locations of electric vehicle or EV charging stations, storm resiliency. However, since 2021, climate change, this law was passed on February 8th, 2021. Climate change hazard vulnerability assessment is very essential. We've had Superstorm Sandy, we've had Ida, we've had all these Irene. So, it's necessitated the need for having all of this. And then finally, based upon the goals and objectives, the existing condition analysis, demographic analysis, projection into the future to see if the population is going to grow, how is it going to grow, a land use plan sets forth recommendations. And these recommendations form the policy framework and the foundation of any potential zoning ordinances. For example, based upon the analysis and rationale, a land use plan may recommend rezoning of areas. They may find that an area that previously had industrial uses may no longer be feasible because it's next to a predominantly single family neighborhood. Perhaps that area would be ideal for mixed use commercial and residential. So this is why planning and land use plans are important. So again, land use recommendations and enabling ordinances, right? So a master plan gets adopted by planning board, as I mentioned. Based upon the plan recommendations, the governing body may choose to update the zoning ordinance. And a municipality is given the ability to adopt their own ordinance. But because each municipality has their right, you will find as engineers, no two municipalities have the same ordinance. They are two separate ordinances. That's what home rule does for us. But any county, state, or federal regulations will supersede any of these local regulations. So, for example, you will deal a lot of this when you're doing residential development. There are residential site improvement standards or RSI standards, which are statewide for improvements in connection to any kind of residential development. So they have street standards, roadway standards, parking standards, and we call them, and engineers use this a lot, and we call it the RSI standards. Another important thing is that since 2021, every municipality is mandated to adopt an electric vehicle ordinance or EV ordinance for any kind of site planning associated with, a site plan or subdivision plan. So that's mandatory. The Department of Community Affairs, which is a state organization, has put out a model ordinance and mandated all municipalities. So that's a uniform ordinance that all municipalities need to adopt. Finally, stormwater management, which engineers love, and you guys deal with that a lot, has also evolved in the past 20 years. There were first best management practices that stormwater management regulations had since 2005. I'm dating myself here, which is really sad. But very recently, almost 4 years ago, those got updated to set forth what causes disturbance, which then triggers off stormwater regulations. And the state had a, a model ordinance but gave the municipalities the freedom to either just stick to that or even have more intense regulations in place. But they also set forth green infrastructure standards in terms of having rain gardens, swales, which you as engineers will be designing in future, because you have to bring any kind of storm water management to the pre-development level to be in compliance with the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection's regulations. Now, I am not an engineer, so please don't ask me technical questions about that. I can just talk about the ordinance. So the reason why I'm going through all of this is to provide an overview of the land use regulations in the state. And this is important because it provides a framework as I'm discussing two case studies. These are the master plans that I have authored for on behalf of H2M for our two municipal clients. One is the town of Westfield, where we did a land use and circulation plan element. And then the second one is the town next to you, City of Jersey City, which is a waterfront community, as you know, and we wrote the historic preservation plan element that was adopted in May of this year. So these are fairly recent. The Westfield project was adopted in June 2021, and I think that was the first ever master plan that I've written that had an discussion on climate change and has hazard vulnerability, because it was written right after the governor adopted this role. So moving on, this is the town of Westfield. I don't know how many of you know where Westfield is, but it's a suburban community with a very vibrant downtown train station. It's a short train ride along the Raritan Bay line. I don't know if it has a path. I don't believe it does, but it provides connectivity to the city and attracts people who work in the city. So this project is very interesting to me. I hope you guys are not bored by this, because I don't know if engineers
No,
like
like
plan.
this is great, and this Westfield is very expensive as well.
It is a very expensive town. That is
Yeah.
correct. So and so is Jersey City. But I just want to then point one thing to all of you is that when I talk about state mandated, one of the things that I didn't write, but I can talk about it is, yes, Westfield is expensive. What is unique about Westfield is the underlying land, just like Jersey City, has a high value. So modest homes got replaced by these mansions, but the state mandates affordable housing. So every municipality since 1986 has to provide their constitutional obligation, which they have a constitutional obligation to provide affordable housing. So I, because of sustainability, I didn't want to go into that detail, but I will definitely talk about it as how this master plan provided that and was very consistent with their affordable housing plan element and their strategies to continue to provide affordable housing to be compliant with the state mandate. So as I mentioned, the land use planning is mandatory, land use plan is mandatory. A circulation plan element is discretionary, right? That's the one that I marked in green in few slides ago. Now, in municipal master plans across New Jersey, the interrelated planning topics of land use and circulation have been addressed separately, separate master plans. But these two are inextricably linked together, and especially so in a town that has a transit infrastructure and a town that has a downtown area. That's not common in New Jersey. So that made Westfield very unique. And the intent with this was to take a holistic approach to planning, which elevated the focus from just singular parcels and singular intersections to a system of relationship between them. It's important to note that each of these land uses creates unique traffic impacts and creates parking demands, right? So that location of the land use is with next to each other is very important because it also influences how transportation is used. For example, people may be more apt to walk, bike, or drive depending on a variety of conditions. And a well-planned community is that is more transit supportive and hence sustainable, developing at densities, what we call as critical mass. It supports that, and which in turn then brings vibrancy in terms of businesses that are attracted. So Westfield is an example of that. It had these good bones, right? So I just want to give you guys, these are a few pictures. This is the train station picture. This is the downtown area. This is a their fire company, which is very close to the train station. If you look at this, it's a portion of the downtown. There's a train line and the train station, which really divides it into two portions, the north and the south side. What's interesting is if you look at, as engineers, you can completely understand that. Look at the way this is. This is not pedestrian friendly at all. This is more automobile friendly, if you will. There are these, areas. The blue ones are town-owned parcels, and this was a vacant Lord and Taylor site, 1960s design, no stormwater management, vacant store, etc., etc. So every municipality has its assets, has its challenges, right? So the challenges here was this vacant site. There were other areas that were underutilized. So the state of New Jersey has what we call as redevelopment statutes, which allows a municipality to redevelop their sites. It's a whole different statutory requirements. They're called Local Redevelopment and Housing Law, or LRHL, which is different from the MLUL. But the master plan provides a foundation so that should the municipality decide, they can adopt redevelopment plans in the future. And for the purposes of this seminar, that is also a form of sustainable development where you have vacant parking lots, or you have buildings that have underutilized parking lots, I'm sorry, and buildings that have been vacant, they get redeveloped to bring in more people, more businesses, and just make it viable, which is also a sustainable form of development than just going and developing green spaces or green land, which is, there aren't too many vacant parcels in New Jersey, but I hope you understand what I'm trying to say with this. Okay, so those are one of the challenges. The other challenge was that, as you can see, this Lord and Taylor site was disconnected with the rest of the downtown, right? So there, then most importantly, because of the state affordable housing mandates, there was a need to create opportunities for mixed use affordable housing. So there were all these opportunities and challenges. We do, when we typically do circulation plan elements, um, or land use plan elements, we call it as heat maps, where we look at the crash data, we look at what intersections have pedestrian and bike or vehicle pedestrian crashes. So we did that. So we wanted to address the pedestrian and bicycle conflicts. Any town, and I'm sure you know this in your Hoboken, parking is a big issue. Parking challenges are sometimes true, sometimes perception. Sometimes people are just lazy and I don't want to walk. I mean, I'm not saying Hoboken, but generally suburban communities. So those were the different things that were looked at. And what are the assets for this town? It has a train station right in the downtown, excellent bus station, so great connectivity. They had a traditional historic downtown. That's why I shared these pictures with mixed uses. So based on that, we started developing the master plan. We H2M engaged with the different stakeholders in the township, because, no matter how great your master plan is, it needs to get buy-in from the community. So, and people have perceptions, misperceptions about things. It's best to engage and provide a clear picture. Um, so Westfield's existing community farm, and I'll get to that in detail in a little bit. This vibrant downtown, it was surrounded by residential neighborhoods, which were all within walking distance. It provided a unique opportunity to consider both land use and transportation together in a single document. And this existing farm influenced how residents are going to utilize the town's transportation system. And the goal was that studying how it currently functions and projecting how it could function in future was imperative to have more sustainable, high quality development that activated the downtown and the desire of the people to be there. And it also gave us a reason to even determine the level of densities, building heights that they could support in that area. And again, changing the way we discuss land use and transportation issues together instead of separately ensured a holistic planning, and it created a mechanism to use data and processes to determine future growth strategies. And it enabled a process where land use planners like myself worked with transportation professionals, and we worked collaboratively to identify a single set of goals, objectives, and implementable actions to capitalize upon this transit-friendly location and the future redevelopment project, such as the Lord and Taylor site, which now is getting developed after 3.5 years. So when I talk about the downtown, right, I just mentioned that the train station divides it, chops it into two areas, and these are like 5 sub areas. And when we talk about a community farm, what this is called the community downtown Westfield community farm map, right? This a plan aimed to address that built environment I was talking about holistically through analyzing and making recommendations for the type of buildings, spaces, uses that make up this area, while taking into account the street system that I was just describing, the relationship between the uses, the street network, the challenges, etc., etc. And these, I have these in different colors. That's it's a map taken from the actual master plan. The existing conditions in each of these sub areas warranted the need to treat them with their own unique potential for new development, and how that development could be guided within those existing parameters, right? So overall principles were improvements to the public realm, streetscape improvements, allowable densities, type of uses. And these areas in green, this is the Lord and Taylor site. If you can see my cursor, the areas in green were in potential redevelopment areas that were identified. We also looked at the zoning and land use updates to basically explore the use of architectural design standards to address existing zoning to encourage greater residential and offices to bring more people into the downtown, both during the workday, evening hours. So it creates a vibrant 18-hour downtown. But then as you go from the downtown, you go into single family residential units. So it was equally important to create what we call as fringe areas. So we made recommendations to identify appropriate locations to permit ground floor office uses. The reason why I'm explaining this to you guys is if there's a store, the store goes on, store hours are till 9 p.m., right? Offices typically by 6 o'clock, it becomes a ghost town. Having an office in a downtown is counterproductive to activating the space. So, but it works as an excellent transitional area. And you don't get, and you'll find those of you who become civil engineers that in planning board meetings, people come with pitchfork and knives if you want to change anything in their backyard. So not that it happened in Westfield, but I'm just talking about doing this in for over 23 years. Most importantly, it explored the opportunity of the use of redevelopment of areas such as the vacant lot and Taylor site, creating a opportunities for affordable housing. We made recommendations in terms of how the building heights can be increased, which part of this area it would be ideal for. This is again all part of sustainable development, right? We also looked into streetscape improvements that you as engineers love. One of it is road diets. So we looked into reducing the recommendations to reduce the number of lanes and to reapportion that space for other uses, such as maybe public spaces, pedestrian refuge islands, traffic calming, and then it also to create pedestrian connectivity, because a four-lane road, even if it's in a prime single family residential, you're tempted to drive faster. But if you have streetscape improvements, it makes you slow down, enjoy that as you're driving. And then we also made parking recommendations. Shared parking is an ideal way you avoid a sea of asphalt that you see based in suburban towns. We also looked into payment in lieu of parking. It's called the pile-up program. It's a valuable tool for promoting new development, especially when there's adequate mass transit that's present. And residents and employees in the downtown have the option to use that alternative mode. You also made other recommendations, such as creating a character for that downtown, like placemaking. But that's again ideal for economic development, which is also a form of making a town sustainable, right? Then finally, these smart growth principles that I just spoke were incorporated throughout the master plan. And we also had recommendations. This was just before the mandatory uh, uh, ordinance came. I think it came about in September of 2021, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, the recommendations also spoke about furthering sustainability from the existing ordinances. There were EV charging agreements to see that, and to monitor the charging stations that were built. To see if it's in compliance, to identify additional publicly accessible charging stations. So we just identified the EV, this is a map that's taken from there. Then finally, we spoke about, I want to talk about the climate change hazard vulnerability, which is an essential part of a land use plan element since February of 2021. And the statutes are very clear what it should include to analyze the current and future threats and vulnerabilities of a municipality associated with the climate change related natural hazards, to include a build out analysis of any kind of future commercial, residential, industrial developments, and to assess that with respect to threats and vulnerabilities as a part of as a part of the climate change. So whatever hazards and vulnerabilities that will be related to this development. It's also important to identify critical facilities, flood-prone areas, roadways, infrastructure that's necessary when there's an evacuation required, and then potential impact of natural hazards on components and elements of the master plan. So each of these plan elements need to be interlinked. They cannot be prepared in a silo because they are interlinked with each other. And then strategies and design standards which are available to reduce or avoid risk associated with these natural hazards. And there's a policy statement that's required too, but that's too technical, not really relevant. But one of the things I do want to talk about is this table on the top, which is what is the hazard and what is the priority level. And Westfield is located in Western Union County, so it's generally not subject to coastal related natural hazards like sea level rise or storm surges that more waterfront communities are susceptible to. Coastal storms like hurricanes, however, present a high impact hazard, as you can see with H is for high, M is for medium. And in this particular uh, town, it relates to wind impacts because it's a bucolic tree-lined community, and these streets, along with like significant residential wooded lots, are susceptible to that. They have utilities that are overhead wires because it's older community. So there are other things that are associated with this. And as such, those have the highest potential. Flooding, these are the four tiny flood areas. It's a medium impact. It really is not substantial for this town. And, so basically, this with flooding, it mostly occurs during extreme rain events, and they can simply be intense inland storms or cyclones, easters. There is no, I mean, it talks about ice storm and severe storm winter as a um, high risk, but it's most likely attributed to mitigating the hazards associated with the winter storms, like trees falling down or power outages, as opposed to something that is like extreme cold, that it's, you have heat loss or etc. So based on that, these are just highlights of the recommendations, but basically to maintain adequate amount of green space and vegetative cover, which addresses impervious surface coverage, which addresses stormwater management issues, to continuously update street treat inventory and remove trees that can cause damage in a to ensure that all critical facilities have backup generators, and to ensure critical bridges leading out of the town can withstand major flooding events. So one of the things for having this uh, tree inventory is basically, as I mentioned, overhead wires. They tend to be a hazard. The other thing too is we also recommended how practicable it is to also try to have these utilities be underground. So these were a few recommendations. Now, I have this other interesting project which I really want to talk about because first, it's closer to home to you guys. B, it's a waterfront community. And C, it's a whole different type of planning, which was very interesting. So I thought I'll include that. Do I have the time for
Yeah,
it?
we have about 7 minutes left.
Oh, wonderful. So no, that's perfect. So what is a historic preservation plan element, right? It's a discretionary plan element, and it was developed in accordance with the municipal land use law. It provides a policy guide for protection of a municipality's historic resources. And there are benefits to that because it provides a sense of place, it creates a community identity, offers foundation for economic development through tourism and commerce. And basically, as tract housing and strip malls make more and more places look the same, it's important to keep for communities to keep their identities intact. So if one or two striking historic buildings define a community and provide a visual link to the past, if whole neighborhoods are preserved, that effect is much, much greater. So as we did with the land use plan element, we also looked at what are the existing conditions. You guys are familiar with Jersey City. It is like Westfield, the underlying land is more expensive. There are development trends. There's demolition for new developments. So that led to destruction of the existing historic homes. So this plan enables a town, or it will enable the town to protect its historic resources. And again, historic preservation is a very good tool for economic development. There are statistics related to that. I don't have the time to go into it, but rapid growth has happened in the city following the 2008 recession. There's a decrease in affordable housing, which converted multifamily units into single family units. Flooding concerns, as you all know. Now, Jersey City, this plan got adopted in May of this year. Jersey City's land use plan, we didn't write it, somebody did, was adopted in 2022, Jan 2022. And it provided the analysis as we spoke for Westfield, very similar: population, employment, housing, land use, etc., etc. But it also spoke about the hazard vulnerability related to climate change and had a whole section on historic preservation. So we wanted to sort of compare both of that. And it specifically looked at vulnerability with respect to the historic district, not mandated, but we did it. And this is very interesting. We identified areas, this is the entire city. The red are the historic preservation districts. Obviously, Ellis Island is a part of that. We also looked at what's a part of the downtown, and we looked to maintain the historic character. It has to be feasible and affordable, and it has to reduce the flood risk. Now, this issue with climate change and vulnerability, extreme weather, is not just restricted to New Jersey or New York, but it's across the country, right? So the state, U.S. Department of Interior, which is the state historic, released its guidelines on flood adaptation for rehabilitating historic buildings. These are the 2 pages from the master plan that I've included. And these are the excerpts from from these recommendations. And it's very interesting for you guys as engineers, I hope, but some of this is a temporary site and landscape adaptation. So this is a real example in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, which built a permanent flood wall along an existing dock. This is at Fort Hancock. The barracks building was relocated, and exterior mechanical equipment was on an elevated platform. There's dry flood proofing where you have like aquarium glass windows in Baltimore. There's steel reinforcements. The wet flood proofing basically provides inlets for the floodwaters to move. In some places, they fill out the basement, lift the building to elevate the foundation, elevate the interior structure. But this was very important, and I love this the most, is abandoning the lower floor. So permanent abandonment of the ground floor, which requires all the activities to move upwards. So that way you do not, do not tamper with the historic character of a building. So these were a few recommendations that we analyzed, and then finally set forth recommendations for the historic preservation plan element. And what is really relevant to the topic on hand is what I'm presenting. So we recommended updating the existing guidelines to provide specific standards to regulate the incorporation of sustainable building designs, to investigate the potential to allow for an increase in permitted height to as per the base flood elevation, as per the FEMA maps or the DEP designated floodplains, to consider incorporating the Department of Interior's guidelines, which I just spoke about, to rehabilitate historic buildings, to incorporate standards for historic properties in identified flood hazard area. And then finally, this is just an amazing tool to create standards for adaptive reuse of historic structures to maintain the character. And there are so many examples all over the state, as well as elsewhere in the country, where like churches are converted into homes, or so that's the one I can just think of the top of my head. And we come to the end of this presentation. Thank you,
Right.
everyone, for staying and
Absolutely
listening.
right on time. And that was
So,
that was really an excellent presentation.
oh,
Very,
thank you
very
so much.
illustrative.